Ladies and gentlemen, let me begin with a statement that might ruffle a few feathers. Stop being kind to everyone. Now, before you call me heartless, let me clarify. Kindness without discernment is weakness in disguise. You're not called to be everybody's doormat. You're called to walk in purpose, build the kingdom, and elevate others who are willing to grow, not carry dead weight out of guilt or fear. So let's talk about the 4 key reasons why you need to stop spreading your kindness like peanut butter on burnt toast. Kindness is a beautiful thing. It's one of the fruits of the Spirit. It reflects the heart of God. But let me tell you something you might not hear in church or from your feel-good friends. Kindness without boundaries will break you. See, we've been taught to be nice. We've been conditioned to always say yes, to turn the other cheek over and over and over again, even when the same hand keeps slapping you. And we start believing that kindness equals holiness, that being worn out, emotionally drained, and mentally exhausted somehow makes us more righteous. But here's the truth. Kindness without boundaries isn't Christ-like. It's careless. And I don't say that to be mean. I say it to wake you up. You can't pour from an empty cup, but some of y'all are trying to pour from a cracked one. You're leaking your joy, leaking your peace, leaking your time, trying to help everybody and their mama. While your soul is screaming for rest, you turn yourself into a 24-hour spiritual gas station, and everybody's filling up on your energy, but nobody's paying. And guess what happens next? Burnout, mental exhaustion, resentment, bitterness. And then you start asking questions like, why don't people appreciate me? Why doesn't anybody show up for me? The answer is simple. You taught them that your time, your help, your love was always available with no cost, no limits, and no standards. Let me ask you something. If someone walked into your business and kept taking your product off the shelf without paying, will you let them? Of course not. You'd call security, you'd lock the door, you'd post a sign. But when it comes to your time, your energy, your emotional bandwidth, you're giving it away like it's a clearance sale. That's not holy. That's not humble. That's unwise. Even Jesus, the ultimate example of kindness and compassion, set boundaries. He healed many, but he didn't heal everyone. He ministered to thousands, but he didn't chase people who walked away. He retreated often to be alone with the Father. He protected his peace, his purpose, and his time. But you're afraid to say no. You think saying no makes you selfish, saying no makes you rude, saying no makes you look un-Christ-like. But let me tell you, sometimes the most spiritual word you can say is no. No, I can't attend every event. No, I can't solve your problem for the 5th time this week. No, I can't keep lending you money when you refuse to steward your own. That's not hate, that's wisdom. And if you don't learn to set those boundaries, you're going to break. You're going to wake up one day and not even recognize yourself. You'll be surrounded by people yet feel completely alone. You'll keep saying yes to everyone else while silently saying no to yourself, to your purpose, to your health, and to your joy. Hear me, you are not the Savior. That position is already filled. Your job is not to rescue everyone. Your job is to be obedient to your assignment. And if helping someone else constantly pulls you away from your calling, then you're not helping, you're hindering your destiny. And let's be real, some of the people you're being kind to are not even interested in growing. They're not interested in change. They're addicted to the comfort of your help. They don't want responsibility, they want rescue. And every time you show up to save them, you're training them to need you more and grow less. That's not kindness, that's enabling. That's not love, that's codependent. So what's the solution? Boundaries, not walls, not bitterness, not cold-hearted detachment, boundaries, loving limits, guardrails for your soul, fences with gates. And guess what? Boundaries are biblical. Proverbs 4:23 says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Guarding your heart doesn't mean isolating yourself. It means using wisdom to decide what comes in and what gets to stay. It means protecting your mind, your energy, your mission, and your calling. If you want to be kind, great, but be smart with your kindness, be selective, be spirit-led, because when your cup is full, when you've got peace, energy, clarity, joy, you can love better, serve better, give better, and leave better. But when your kindness is leaking through the cracks of broken boundaries, it's not really kindness, it's survival. It's a mask. And eventually the mask falls off, and what's left is a tired, resentful version of you that nobody gets the benefit of, including God. So if you've been kind to everybody and exhausted by it, I've got news for you. You're allowed to stop. You're allowed to rest. You're allowed to say no, and you're allowed to create boundaries that protect your peace and preserve your purpose. Kindness is powerful, but kindness with boundaries, that's transformational, that's sustainable, that's kingdom-minded. And that's what you were called to walk in. Let's cut through the fluff. This might be hard to hear, but it will set you free. Not everyone deserves your kindness. Some people don't need another ounce of your compassion. They need your absence. I know that sounds harsh. I know we were raised to believe that being good means being endlessly available, that we're supposed to be the bigger person every time, that we should smile through disrespect, turn the other cheek until we're dizzy, and give second, third, 50th chances because that's just who we are. But let me tell you something. Just because you have a kind heart doesn't mean everyone gets access to it. Your kindness is a currency. It has value. It costs you time. It costs you energy. It costs you emotional bandwidth. And if you keep spending it on people who are committed to misunderstanding you, disrespecting you, or draining you, eventually you'll find yourself bankrupt in spirit and wondering why. Now, I'm not saying be bitter. I'm not saying be mean. I'm saying be wise. Because kindness without wisdom is an open invitation for exploitation. There are people in your life right now who have learned that no matter what they do, no matter how little they give, no matter how much they take, you'll still show up with a smile, with your arms open, with your heart on the table. And if you don't draw a line in the sand, they will keep stepping over it. Let me ask you, how many times have you forgiven someone who never even apologized? How many times have you stayed loyal to people who were only loyal to their convenience? How many times have you shown up for folks who only remember you when they need something? That's not love. That's not kindness. That's emotional self-sabotage dressed up as virtue. There's a difference between being gracious and being gullible. There's a difference between being merciful and being manipulated. And if you confuse the two, you'll keep entertaining relationships that do nothing but subtract from your life. The truth is, some people were only meant to walk with you for a season, and you've been dragging them into every chapter like they're part of the whole story. They were a lesson, not a lifetime partner. They were a reminder, not a requirement. And you keep trying to bless what God has been trying to block. There's a reason the Bible says, do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. That means your heart can be pure, your intentions noble, and your spirit sincere. But if you keep surrounding yourself with people who don't honor your kindness, it will rot the good in you. Some of the people you're trying to be kind to, they don't need help, they need distance. They need you to remove your presence so they can actually feel the consequence of their own choices. Because as long as you're cushioning their fall, they'll never learn how to stand. As long as you're always picking up the pieces, they'll keep breaking things. As long as you're available on demand, they'll never value your presence. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is leave. Not with anger, not with drama, but with clarity. To walk away is not to hate, it's to heal. To stop responding is not to punish, it's to protect your peace. To stop answering the door every time they knock is not to be petty, it's to preserve your purpose. Because every moment you spend trying to fix someone who doesn't want to change is a moment you're stealing from your own growth. Every time you shrink yourself to be more understanding of their dysfunction, you're stepping further away from your calling. Every time you justify mistreatment in the name of being kind, you're watering weeds in a garden that's supposed to bear fruit. Let them feel your absence. Let them notice the silence where your voice used to be. Let them sit with the reality that you are not endlessly accessible, because sometimes your silence will teach them what your words never could. And if they never change, if they never come back, then that's your answer. Not everyone is meant to go where you're going. Not everyone is supposed to have a seat at your table. You've been trying to build a palace with people who are still thinking like prisoners. That's why the vision feels heavy. You're carrying people who were never meant to be carried. So today, I'm giving you permission to release them. You don't owe them your energy. You don't owe them another explanation. You don't owe them access to the healed, elevated, transformed version of you. You owe it to yourself to your peace, your purpose, your God-given assignment. To stop watering dead soil. Kindness isn't about being liked. It's about living a line. And sometimes the most kind, most loving, most spiritual thing you can do is walk away. We live in a world where being nice has become a survival tactic. People think that if they're just kind enough, sweet enough, agreeable enough, they'll win favor, open doors, get opportunities, and keep the peace. But let me drop a truth bomb right here. Kindness is not a strategy. Clarity is. And if you don't learn the difference, you'll spend your whole life being used by people who praise your kindness but profit off your confusion. See, kindness is beautiful, but when it becomes your default operating system, your autopilot response to everything, you're not being strategic, you're being passive. And passivity masquerading as kindness is the quickest way to lose control of your time, your boundaries, and your destiny. People will take what you don't define. If you don't make it clear who you are, what you value, what you tolerate, and what you stand for, the world will write that story for you. And most of the time, they'll get it wrong. Clarity is power. Clarity is protection. Clarity is alignment with purpose. You want to know why some people walk all over you? It's not because you're too kind. It's because you're not clear. You haven't drawn the line. You haven't communicated the boundary. You haven't expressed what's okay and what's not. So they interpret your silence as permission. They see your kindness as weakness. They confuse your patience for approval. Let me tell you, unclear people get exploited. Unclear leaders get disrespected. Unclear partners get disappointed. And unclear believers live beneath their calling because they're too busy trying to be nice when they should be getting aligned. Clarity tells the world who you are before the world tells you who to be. Jesus was kind, but he was never unclear. He didn't beg people to stay. He didn't sugarcoat truth to avoid hurting feelings. He didn't say yes to everything just to be liked. He spoke truth, he corrected, he confronted, he declared. And in every interaction, his purpose was crystal clear. And that's why he had authority. That's why he shifted atmospheres. That's why demons trembled, because he wasn't walking around trying to please people. He was on assignment, and that assignment required clarity, not just kindness. Look around your life. Look at your relationships, your business, your ministry, your time. Ask yourself, am I being kind or am I being clear? Because kindness says, I don't want to offend you. Clarity says, here's where I stand. Kindness says, sure, I'll do it even though I don't have the capacity. Clarity says, I'd love to help, but I'm not available for that right now. Kindness says, maybe they didn't mean it. Clarity says this behavior is unacceptable, and I won't tolerate it again. See the difference? Kindness keeps the peace. Clarity creates peace. One is external, the other is internal. Kindness makes people feel comfortable. Clarity helps people grow. And let's be honest, some of us are so obsessed with being liked, we've sacrificed our voice on the altar of people's comfort. But God didn't call you to be popular. He called you to walk in power. He called you to steward your gifts, your influence, your time. And none of that happens without clarity. You need to be clear about your standards, clear about your calling, clear about what you're available for and what you're not, clear about who you allow in your inner circle, clear about how you handle conflict, clear about your values. Because if you're not clear, you'll keep getting caught in cycles of misalignment, frustration, and confusion and calling it kindness. Stop hiding behind niceness when God has called you to boldness. Some of y'all are one bold conversation away from freedom, one act of clarity away from peace, one strong boundary away from your next level. But you keep playing it safe thinking your kindness is keeping the peace when really it's just postponing the necessary tension that leads to breakthrough. You cannot build an empire, raise a healthy family, run a profitable business, or lead a movement without clarity, because everything flows from it. Your time, your decisions, your relationships, your confidence, all of it is rooted in your ability to communicate who you are and what you stand for. And listen, clarity doesn't mean you're rude. It means you're honest. It doesn't mean you lack compassion. It means you value alignment over approval. It doesn't mean you stop loving people. It means you stop enabling dysfunction in the name of being nice. Kindness should be a fruit of your spirit, not a strategy for people pleasing. When you lead with clarity, kindness becomes even more powerful. Why? Because now your kindness is intentional. It's not coming from obligation or fear. It's flowing from confidence and self-awareness. You're no longer being kind to avoid conflict. You're being kind on purpose, with purpose. Clarity will cost you some people, but it will attract the right ones. It will close some doors, but it will open better ones. It will create discomfort, but it will birth destiny. So stop using kindness as a mask. Let your yes be yes. Let your no be no. Show up in truth. Speak with boldness. Lead with conviction. Be clear, because kindness may open the door, but clarity is what will build the house. There comes a point where kindness has to take a back seat to conviction. A moment where compassion must make room for confrontation. And if you've been taught that being a follower of Christ means being passive, silent, agreeable, and endlessly tolerant, then let me reintroduce you to Jesus, the one who flipped tables in the temple. Yes, Jesus, the Lamb of God, the Prince of Peace, the one full of grace and truth, but also the same Jesus who walked into the temple, saw the mess, the manipulation, the disrespect, and shut it down, not with a polite email, not with a carefully worded statement. He flipped tables. He made a scene, he caused disruption, and he did it on purpose. Because there is a time for kindness, and there is a time for holy confrontation. The Jesus that flipped tables wasn't having a bad day. He wasn't being unchristlike. He was being exactly who he needed to be in that moment. A protector of truth, a defender of righteousness, a challenger of corruption, and you as a believer have access to that same authority. But many of you have been conditioned to think that strength is sin and silence is virtue. That's not Bible, that's culture. And it's time we break that lie. Jesus didn't flip tables in the temple because he hated people. He did it because he loved them too much to let them stay in the dark. He wasn't trying to be popular with the religious elite. He wasn't trying to avoid offense. He was driven by purpose, not approval. His actions weren't random, they were righteous. And sometimes righteousness doesn't look like a smile. It looks like a boundary. It looks like resistance. It looks like bold correction. Now, you may never walk into a church and physically flip a table, but spiritually, emotionally, in your relationships, your business, your family, there are some tables that need flipping. Tables where people have been taking advantage of your kindness. Tables where manipulation has sat too long. Tables where compromise has replaced conviction. Tables where your silence has enabled systems, cycles, and people that God never called you to tolerate. You don't flip tables because you're angry. You flip tables because you're done allowing things to live in places they don't belong. You see, the temple was supposed to be a place of worship, but they turned it into a marketplace. They were profiting off sacred things. And Jesus said, enough. And you've got to have that same moment in your life where you stop entertaining what's comfortable and start confronting what's corrupt. It could be the way you've allowed certain people to speak to you. It could be how long you've tolerated laziness in your business. It could be how you've stayed silent when you were supposed to stand firm. It could be the way you've settled for dysfunction in the name of keeping the peace. But let me tell you something, peace without truth is not peace, it's pretense. And pretending will cost you your purpose. There are times where flipping a table means walking away from a toxic relationship and not looking back. Sometimes it means restructuring your business and firing people who no longer belong on your team. Sometimes it means finally telling your family, I love you, but I refuse to carry the weight of your expectations anymore. Sometimes it means facing the mirror and flipping the internal tables you've set up. Those lies you believed about your worth, your calling, your capacity. Flipping tables is not about chaos. It's about clearing the space for what's sacred again. Jesus didn't flip tables and leave destruction. He flipped tables so that alignment could return to the house of God. He was restoring order, reclaiming purpose. And that's exactly what some of you need to do right now. Flip what's false, break what's broken, and rebuild with truth. You've been quiet long enough. You've been kind at the cost of your clarity. You've tolerated behavior that grieves your spirit. You've made excuses for people who are old enough to know better and capable enough to do better. And now it's time. Time to move with boldness, time to speak with power, time to confront the things you once tolerated. Because here's the truth. What you don't confront, you give permission to exist, and what you allow will eventually define your environment. Jesus never walked in fear. He didn't tiptoe around people's feelings when the truth was on the line. He loved deeply, but he also led fiercely. And you're not called to be a doormat in the name of being Christian. You're called to be a light, and light exposes darkness. It doesn't apologize for existing. So yes, be kind. Yes, be gracious, but don't you dare confuse that with weakness. You carry the Spirit of the living God. And when that Spirit says, it's time to flip this table, you move without hesitation, without apology. Because some tables can't stay standing if you're going to move forward. Some tables have to fall so purpose can rise. Some tables have to flip so that destiny has space to breathe. And if Jesus didn't hesitate to flip a table in the face of corruption and spiritual abuse, then neither should you. So no, don't be rude. Don't be cruel, but stop being indiscriminately kind, because every time you say yes to someone you shouldn't, you're saying no to the mission you've been called to fulfill. Be kind, but be wise. Be generous, but be guarded. Love people, but lead with truth. And remember, God didn't call you to please everybody. He called you to impact the right ones. Thank you.